Hey everybody, this is Steve Such and welcome to the Ask the Drummer podcast. Today we have a question about building a website. So let's go ahead and get to today's question.
Hi Steve, this is Nick Lang from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My question involves building a personal website. As a drummer educator for hire, what information would you say is most essential for my website? Also, what shouldn't I include? And as a person with limited computer skills, are there any website building services that have helped you? Any information would be super helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the question, Nick. This is a great question about building a website. And I'll be honest, when I first started out, I had no idea what I was doing when it came to a website. I kind of had to figure out everything myself. And I sure wish that I had something to refer to when I was building my website. So what I want to do in this episode is kind of give you a step-by-step guide on how to build a website. Let's imagine that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You're starting from complete scratch, and you want to know, what do I need to do to get started with a website? So I've kind of broken it down into 7 steps. And I'll just run through them real quickly. Step 1 is to buy a domain name. Step 2 is to buy a web hosting service. Step 3 is to come up with the roadmap of your website. Step 4 is to build the actual page. Step 5 is to check for errors. Step 6 is to get feedback from people. And step 7 is to share your site with people. So I'm going to go through each of these steps in a little bit more detail, and we'll talk about what exactly you should do. So step 1 is that you should buy a domain name. Now, the domain name is the name that people will type in on the search bar in order to find your website. So, for example, my domain name is stevesuchdrums.com. I also have separate domains for other projects like this podcast. So if you go to askthedrummer.com or askthedrummerpodcast.com, it will automatically reroute to stevesuchdrums.com. But basically the point here is that you need to have a custom domain. You need to have, let's say, yournamedrums.com or just yourname.com. It's really important because if you have kind of a really long, confusing, free domain, it's not as powerful as having your own name listed in the search results. So when someone actually searches for your name, for example, if they type in Steve Such, my website will come up. So it's just really important to have a custom domain name, and you should definitely get this as soon as possible if you don't already have one. There's a lot of places where you can get custom domains. The place that I use is Google Domains. So you can literally just go to Google and type in Google Domains, and it'll bring you to the page, and I believe it's $12 a year for your own domain name. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to buy a web hosting service. Now, this is super important because unless you're a computer programmer or a web designer, you're not going to know how to build your page. And so to keep it super simple, you should get a web hosting service. Now, the service that I use is called Squarespace. I'm sure if a lot of you listen to podcasts, you've heard them talk about Squarespace in maybe in their ads. I have been using Squarespace for I think about 8 or 9 years now, and it is completely awesome. I'm not going to go into huge detail about it because I'm not trying to be an ad for Squarespace or anything like that, but it's super easy to use, and you literally have to have no web experience. You can just drag and drop stuff and things like that. So it's just super easy. I would highly recommend it. And I'm actually I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to reach out to Squarespace to see if Ask the Drummer listeners can get a 10% promo or something like that. If that's the case, you can go to askthedrummer.com and search for the show notes for this episode, and the promo code, whatever it will be on that page. So just check that out. You might as well get a discount if you're going to go ahead and do it. If not, no worries either. So now the third step is to come up with a roadmap of your website. And what I mean by roadmap is sort of like a table of contents. There's 4 different pages that I think are absolutely crucial to your website. The first is a home page. The second would be a bio page. The third would be a videos page. And the fourth would be a contact page. And really quickly, a lot of these are very obvious, but just to kind of explain it a little bit, a homepage is just designed as the first thing that people will see when they get to your website. So maybe it has a specific call to action like, oh, check out this new album, or check out this project that I'm doing, or check out this news, or whatever it might be. The homepage is the first stop for people. And it also kind of shows where people can go on the website. The bio page is just where you include a bio about yourself. Maybe you have a nice picture and include a bio. I wouldn't recommend making a super long bio because think about it. If you ever go to someone's page and you check out their bio, you're not going to read like a 3-page bio. You're just going to read maybe a little bit or you'll skim through it. So I would recommend kind of keeping your bio short. The third page that you need is a videos page. And this is super important because your website is basically like your business card. And if people don't have a way of checking out your playing, then the whole thing is kind of pointless. So you need to have a videos page where you maybe link to your YouTube channel. If you don't have a YouTube channel by now, you should definitely have one because, again, it's a way for people to see your playing and kind of follow what you're doing. So you should definitely have a videos page, and the cool thing about Squarespace is you can just embed the videos right on the page. It's super easy. And the last page that I think you really need is some sort of a contact page. So this is maybe where you have a form where people can email you, or you put your phone number, or maybe if you're doing lessons, you could say that you're available for lessons. You just need to have some sort of a page where if people want to reach out to you, they can. And just a funny little story, I never really thought this was important, but I've actually, I'm not even making this up, I've been contacted by random people that live in my area who have actually hired me for gigs. You know, at first I thought, oh, this sounds really sketchy. Someone just randomly found me and wanted to hire me, but it actually happened. And turns out the guy was great, and I ended up working several gigs with him, and it was totally fine. So if I hadn't had a contact page, he wouldn't have been able to find me. He wouldn't have been able to reach out to me. So I think it's really important to have a contact page. And just some optional pages that you might need. Some people like to include maybe a schedule page or a tour page. I have this on my website. This is for people that if you're touring a lot, if you're playing a lot around town, and you want people to know where you're at, you can include a tour page. And the second kind of optional page that I'd recommend is a news page. So, you know, if you have big things coming up, like an album release or some kind of accomplishment that you've done, or maybe an article that you've written or something like that, you can put it in your news page, and that way people can see what you're up to there. And obviously there's a ton of other pages. It just depends on what you're doing. So, for example, for me, I have this podcast, so I have my own little podcast page. I also have another project called Rules for Drummers. You can check it out at rulesfordrummers.com. And so on my website, I have different pages that are just devoted to those projects. So it really just depends on what the purpose of your website is. But again, step 3 is really important. You got to come up with the roadmap for your website before you start doing anything. Okay, so we've bought our domain name. We've got a web hosting service going on. We've made the roadmap of our website. Now we're ready to start building the page. And there's just a few tips that I have on building your page. Just take it one page at a time. So I would start with the home page, make it look really nice, do the best work that you can, and then just move on to the next page. Don't try to bounce back and forth and do everything all at once. It's a lot better if you just spend some time, focus on each page, and then move on. You should keep your website clean and straightforward. So don't have a ton of text. Don't make weird colors. Don't have weird backgrounds on your pictures. All that stuff is just going to make it really difficult to read. I wish that I could show you guys some of my first website designs because it looked really awful. I had this like distracting picture of me drumming in the background, and I had like green text, and it looked awful. It was like giving you a headache when you're reading it. So hopefully it's a lot better now. And, you know, I'm still learning as I go. I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to this. But you want to just keep it clean and straightforward and basic. I think less is more for sure. If you ever include a picture in your website, this is just a little quick tip, is make sure that the file name is related to your actual name. So A lot of times when you save a picture and you upload it, it'll have a weird, like, numbers and just random file name. But if you actually name it, maybe your name, so for example, Steve Such Drums, that actually helps with like search engine optimization. So if you type in Steve Such and you go to images, you'll actually see different pictures from my website. And the only reason they show up is because I've labeled them Steve Such. So that's just a little tip. If you're kind of thinking more long-term and you want to have a presence on Google, make sure that you name your files accordingly. Okay, so let's say you've finished building your website and everything is as good as you can get it for right now. Don't get overwhelmed. This is just version 1.0. You're always going to be tweaking your website. You're always going to be making improvements. But step 5 is to check for errors. So when I first started, there was tons of different errors on my website. I had spelling errors. I had links that didn't properly navigate to the right page, like broken links, things like that. You want to make sure that you go through and just test everything. So test everything that's clickable, proofread everything just to make sure that there's no errors or anything like that. If you come across a website that has errors on it, you immediately don't really trust that source, or you don't think that they're serious enough to put in the time to proofread their website. Mistakes happen, but it's just really important to, once you've built everything, just to go through and check for errors. So once you have everything published and you've got your website up and running, step 6 is to get feedback from people. Now, this was a huge step. I remember just sharing my own personal story. I've had this website going for a really long time, and I never really asked for feedback from people. And for example, this project that I've been doing for a while, which is called Rules for Drummers, I finally, after a couple months of doing it, I asked someone for feedback. I was like, hey, could you just take a look at the website and just let me know your impressions? They didn't know anything about the project, and I just kind of wanted to get like an outsider's perspective. Like, what is it like when you first go to the website? And the first thing they said was, dude, this is so confusing. Like, there's all these articles. There's so much content. I have no idea where to go first. I have no idea what to do. It's like information overload. So if I hadn't got that feedback, the website would have just stayed that way, and it would have been really hard for people to navigate. So what I did was I made like a little welcome section at the top where it basically explains what the project is, and then it also suggests a couple of links to check out first. Articles that I think are, representative of some of my better work, I guess. And I noticed that I started getting a ton more traffic on the website, and people stayed on the site for longer, and people were clicking through. And that's all because I got feedback from someone. So step 6 is just to make sure that you get feedback about what people like about your page and what people don't like about your page. And the last step is step 7, which is to share your site with people. So once you have everything up and running and you feel really good about it, there's a couple of things that you should do. One is on your email signature, you should include your website at the bottom of your emails. So now when you send an email to anyone, they will see your website at the bottom of the email. It's a really great way to get people to visit your website. The second thing I would say is just to share your website on Facebook. So if you have a Facebook page, you can link your website on there. And if you don't have a Facebook page, you can just share it. You can just say, hey, everybody, I've launched this website. I'd love to hear what you think. I hope you enjoy it. So just to recap, step 1 is to buy your domain name. Step 2 is to buy a web hosting service. Step 3 is to come up with the roadmap of your website. Step 4 is to build the page. Step 5, check for errors. Step 6, get feedback from people. And step 7, share your website with people. So there you have it. Thank you so much, Nick, for the question. Really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great week. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. This has been really fun for me to get going. This is something I've really wanted to do for a long time. So I appreciate you listening. I'd love any feedback that you have on the podcast. And head on over to askthedrummer.com. You can check out all of the episode show notes. And I'd just love to hear from you. So, feel free to send me an email or send me a Facebook message. I just want to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think of this podcast. All right, have a great week, and I will see you next week. Ciao for now. If you have a question that you'd like answered on the show, head over to facebook.com/SteveSuchDrums and just send me a message with your question. You can also visit SteveSuchDrums.com for a full archive of questions.